She actually called the police over a few buoys floating in the lake. Yeah, I wish I was making that up. One moment I'm unpacking boxes, the next I've got the HOA president pounding on my door like I've committed a crime, then suddenly a sirens. I don't know what sort of power trip she's riding, but it's serious. Neighbors stroll past my place like they're casing it. Flyers with my face started showing up around town. Somehow, I'm the one being accused of trespassing. None of it makes sense. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had a neighbor turn your life into a lawsuit waiting to happen. 3 months ago, I moved back into my grandfather's old lakeside home. After years of jumping from one city apartment to another, I thought I'd finally found some peace. The house had been empty for 2 years since he passed, and it felt right to bring it back to life and to finally put my kayak instructor certification to use. Water safety was always my thing. Something about being on the lake made the rest of the world fade away. It reminded me of when my dad used to take me fishing here as a kid. The lake stretched behind the house like a perfect mirror, catching the pine trees in morning mist. I was finishing unpacking safety gear when I heard footsteps crunching up the gravel driveway. Standing on my porch was Paula Whitman, clipboard hugged to her chest, plastering on one of those smiles that feels more like a warning. She introduced herself as president of something called the Lake HOA. News to me, I had never even heard of such an association. "Welcome to our community," she said in a tone warmer than an IRS audit. Then she shoved paperwork into my hands, telling me I owed $150 a month plus a $200 initiation fee for lake and property maintenance. I looked at the numbers and asked if she was serious. Politely, I handed the clipboard back and told her I wasn't interested. "I've just moved in, and honestly, I haven't seen anything around here that needs that kind of upkeep." Her smile vanished in an instant. Shoulders squared, voice sharpening. She told me nobody lives by the lake without joining the HOA. She made it sound like I was cheating the community out of something precious. Then her patience snapped. "You don't understand how property rights work here," she barked. "This is community lake property, and you're trespassing every time you step foot in the water without paying dues." Before I could even process that wild accusation, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right there on my porch. I stood frozen, listening to her report me for willful trespassing. Who calls the cops over HOA fees? That's like calling the fire department because someone's grass is too green. Officer Owen Bennett arrived a while later. Calm, collected, middle-aged, the kind of guy who looked like he'd refereed plenty of neighborhood disputes. Paula launched into her complaint, accusing me of stealing community resources. I tried to explain my side, but the whole thing felt so absurd I doubted I sounded sane. The officer listened, scribbled in his notepad, and finally said, "This isn't a criminal matter, it's something to sort out through legal channels." He shut his notebook and headed back to his car. Paula's face flushed with fury. She wasn't done, though. She announced that she was closing the dock for 48 hours until I signed the paperwork, like she had the legal authority to lock down my property. The officer just shook his head and drove off, clearly regretting that shift. Once they left, I walked down to my dock, the same one Paula claimed she could shut down. My bright orange safety buoys floated calmly in the water, exactly where I'd placed them. But now I was left questioning everything. Could she be right? Was there something in my grandfather's paperwork I'd missed? I'd been paying property taxes faithfully since inheriting the place. Still, doubt crept in. That night, I tore through boxes of my grandfather's documents in the basement. Dust coated my hands as I dug through decades of meticulously kept records of tax returns, grocery receipts, utility bills. Eventually, buried deep inside a folder marked property line surveys, I found something strange. An old county surveyor's document mentioning lake surface rights in dense legal jargon I could barely understand. The next morning, Paula returned, this time with backup, 2 neighbors in tow and a fresh stack of papers. She spread them across my porch table with the flair of a lawyer addressing a jury. "This documentation proves our legal authority over the lake," she declared, pointing to official seals and signatures. I asked to examine the papers, but she kept angling them so I could only glimpse the impressive letterheads without reading the fine print. "These are certified HOA bylaws," she insisted, jabbing her finger at the stamps. "You're using community property illegally every single time you step near that water without paying." One of her neighbors nodded eagerly, though I noticed his eyes dart nervously toward the lake as if he wasn't sure what rules were even being enforced. The other woman stood silent, watching but not quite convinced. One of Paula's neighbors looked increasingly uneasy during her whole performance, shifting from foot to foot and avoiding my eyes. Their body language made it obvious and not everyone in her little support team was fully buying into this crusade. Later that afternoon, Officer Bennett showed up again. Apparently, Paula had called in another report, this time claiming I was committing ongoing trespassing. But when I mentioned that I'd been paying separate property taxes every year including a line item specifically for lake surface assessments, it seemed to catch his attention. He stopped mid-note and looked up at me, curiosity flickering in his eyes. For the first time, Paula's composure cracked just briefly, but enough to notice. She scrambled to recover, insisting that tax payments didn't override home management rights. But I could see Bennett's doubt creeping in. Finally, he shut his notebook and told her plainly, "Ma'am, I don't see a criminal violation here. If you believe you have a legal claim, you'll need to handle it through civil court, not the police." His tone carried the kind of weary finality of someone done entertaining nonsense. Paula's face went scarlet as she snatched up her papers, clearly furious she wasn't getting the backing she wanted. Before storming off, she announced she'd be posting official notices throughout the neighborhood about the so-called property situation. The threat felt heavy, though I wasn't sure what kind of stunt she'd pull next. Once things quieted down, I walked back to the dock and dropped a few more safety buoys along the boundary lines I'd mapped out from survey markers. It was practical, but also symbolic, my way of staking quiet claim to the property I believed was rightfully mine. The sunlight flickered across the water in patterns that reminded me why I'd wanted this place in the first place. But instead of peace, all I felt was tension gnawing away at me. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Somehow, I'd been added to a neighborhood group text I never agreed to join. Paula had posted her so-called 48-hour notice, rallying everyone against me with dramatic language about an uncooperative resident blocking lake access. The responses rolled in fast, some neighbors confused, others openly hostile, accusing me of trying to steal from the community. Paula had twisted the story so well it was almost impressive. She painted me as some selfish outsider exploiting shared resources, and people were eating it up. What unsettled me most was realizing how effective she was at weaponizing perception. Many of the angry messages came from people I hadn't even met in the 3 months I'd lived here. Yet, they were already convinced I was a problem. By Thursday morning, her campaign had gone public. Flyers were taped to street lights for blocks, shouting in bold red letters, "Urgent community notice, unauthorized lake usage by new resident." Right there under the headline was a blurry photo of me standing on my own dock and my buoys labeled as boundary violations. It would have been funny if it wasn't so malicious. She even printed my address, which felt like crossing a dangerous line. By midday, I was being flooded with official-sounding emails accusing me of property encroachment. They cited county codes I'd never heard of and made it sound like my kayaking was a felony. I couldn't tell if Paula had a legal background or if she was just naturally good at manipulating bureaucratic language, but the precision of her intimidation campaign was chilling. Friday brought a spectacle. Paula gathered a dozen neighbors at my dock for what she called a documentation event. From my kitchen window, I watched them hold signs that read community water access and fair fees for all residents, while Paula snapped photos from every angle like she was building a legal case. Half of the people there seemed fully bought in, proudly posing for pictures as if this were some noble protest. The other half, though, looked uncomfortable, stealing glances toward my house with uncertainty written all over their faces. That visible split made me wonder if Paula's hold on the community was as absolute as she pretended. That evening, I got a call from a man at the county clerk's office. "We've had multiple complaints about boundary disputes near your property," he said, sounding tired. "Can you confirm you're current on your taxes and fees?" I told him yes, everything was paid up. He seemed relieved. "We get these calls a lot. Usually it's just neighbors who don't really understand property lines." His dismissal of the complaints said everything. Paula's official reports weren't getting traction with actual authorities. Still, Saturday morning brought a new twist. I found bright orange surveyor's flags planted in my backyard, scattered at odd intervals that didn't match any property lines I recognized. Whoever placed them wanted to create confusion, maybe even make it look like I was encroaching on someone else's space. I took pictures of every flag before pulling them up and storing them in my garage. It was obvious now, this was deliberate harassment. The pressure campaign was working, too. Every time I stepped outside, I felt watched. Cars slowed as they passed. Neighbors waved with forced cheer that felt more like surveillance than friendliness. Others just stared. Even grocery store trips had turned into a parade of suspicious glances and whispered comments that died when I walked past. Then, Sunday afternoon, a knock at my door. Standing there was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a bottle of water in her hand, almost like a peace offering. "My name's Sophie Clark," she said softly. "I live about 3 blocks away. I just a broken bar wanted to apologize for all this drama." Sophie glanced around nervously, like she was worried someone might catch her speaking with me. "I've been watching all of this unfold," she said quietly. "And something about the way Paula is handling things doesn't sit right." Hearing someone finally admit that this wasn't normal neighborhood behavior felt like a wave of relief. For the first time, I wasn't completely isolated as someone else could see through Paula's carefully staged campaign. Sophie didn't linger long. She left before any watchful neighbor could report back. But when I later tossed the water bottle she'd brought, I found a slip of paper tucked inside. It had a phone number and a short message: "Text me, something's not right about HOA finances." That note felt like the first crack in Paula's armor, a sign that not everyone bought her story. I held on to it for a long while, wondering if reaching out would uncover answers or just entangle me in something messier. By the end of the weekend, I caught myself typing out a long apology text to Paula, second-guessing whether I should just try to smooth things over. But before hitting send, I deleted it. Making peace felt less like resolution and more like surrendering to intimidation. Instead, I shifted gears into full-on evidence-gathering mode, photographing flyers, saving emails, and logging every instance of her escalation. My background in water safety had taught me to stay calm and organized under stress, and now I was treating this neighborhood standoff like a crisis to be documented and navigated. Ironically, Paula's campaign to isolate me might have been too effective for her own good. By Monday, she launched her boldest move yet, a live video broadcast staged right in front of my house. I watched from behind the curtains as she set up a microphone, multiple cameras, even lighting rigs. The entire HOA board stood behind her like props in a carefully choreographed production. She planted herself on the public sidewalk, close enough to make her presence feel invasive but still legally untouchable. The broadcast was polished, rehearsed, and dramatic. She painted herself as the responsible leader defending community values against a selfish neighbor. She gestured toward my house as if it were Exhibit A, convincing to anyone who didn't know the details. Paula was good at too good. Her delivery was confident, her words crafted to make me the villain without ever raising her voice. But then she slipped. While discussing the budget, she said, "I personally approve all spending for this lake," before quickly correcting herself to say the board approved expenditures collectively. The correction was smooth, but I caught the truth buried in her first statement. That moment revealed more than she intended, that she wasn't just a community leader, she was running the show single-handedly. I replayed the clip on my phone just to be sure. It was theory proof that Paula's control over the HOA was far more autocratic than democratic. While she continued her spectacle, I recorded my own short response. Standing on my dock with the buoys and survey markers in clear view, I spoke calmly. "I'm not sure why paying taxes on land I inherited has turned into a controversy. I'm willing to have honest conversations about property boundaries, but public protests and theatrics aren't the way to handle it." The difference was intentional, her drama versus my facts. To my surprise, the response resonated. Comments began rolling in online. Why would someone pay taxes on land they don't own? And has anyone actually seen the HOA documents Paula keeps citing? People were beginning to question her narrative, and that alone shifted the dynamic. The next day, I got a text from Sophie's number: "Check your email." When I did, my stomach dropped. She'd sent photos of Paula's personal calendar, complete with entries about inspections, emergency home meetings, and budget approvals. But the details didn't match reality. She logged maintenance on days when nothing had been done, scheduled meetings that neighbors later confirmed never happened, and approved expenses with no visible results. It was either staggering disorganization or deliberate deception. Either way, it looked bad. By midweek, Paula doubled down, going door to door with a carefully prepared presentation. I watched her move from house to house, giving each neighbor the full pitch. But not everyone was receptive. A few shut their doors early, clearly uninterested in her talking points. Then came the next escalation. Paula announced that she was bringing in a lawyer for what she called a boundary map examination at the upcoming community event of the annual water festival. I hadn't even known the festival existed until now. Paula framed it as the perfect venue for a final resolution. She even circulated a formal-looking notice demanding I bring all property documents with me. On the surface, it looked like a bold legal strike, but to me, it smelled like a bluff. If she truly had the law on her side, why had she spent weeks orchestrating PR stunts instead of going straight to court? By Saturday morning, the festival grounds were alive with music, food, and neighbors mingling in crisp autumn air. To everyone else, it was a celebration. To me, it was about to become a trial. Sophie met me at the pavilion, clutching her own evidence folder, her nerves playing on her face. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. Truthfully, I wasn't sure anyone could ever be ready for a property rights showdown at a family-friendly festival. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on me. Sophie shifted uneasily, glancing around as if she feared being spotted in conversation with me. "I've been following what's been going on," she admitted softly. "And honestly, the way Paula is handling this just doesn't feel right." Hearing those words was almost overwhelming. Finally, someone else recognized that Paula's orchestrated chaos wasn't just normal neighborhood business. Sophie didn't linger. She kept her visit short to avoid suspicion, but she left behind more than a water bottle. When I tossed it later, I found a slip of paper hidden inside with a phone number and a note. "Text me, something's wrong with the HOA finances." That small piece of paper felt like the first real crack in Paula's carefully staged campaign. It proved not everyone was buying into her story. I stared at the number for a long while, debating whether reaching out would uncover answers or drag me deeper into an already messy situation. By Sunday evening, I typed out a long apology message to Paula, tempted to just wave the white flag. But before hitting send, I deleted it. Backing down would have meant letting intimidation work. Instead, I shifted gears into documentation mode, snapping photos of flyers, saving emails, and keeping a detailed record of every escalation. My training in water safety had taught me to stay composed and systematic under stress, and now I was applying those same principles to what felt like neighborhood warfare. Ironically, Paula's efforts to cut me off may have left her overexposed. On Monday, she staged her boldest maneuver yet, a live broadcast right outside my home. From behind the window, I watched as she set up shop on the public sidewalk, just far enough to stay within her rights but close enough to feel invasive. She brought out the full production, microphone, cameras, lighting, and a backdrop of the entire HOA board lined up behind her. The performance was polished. Paula introduced herself as the responsible community leader protecting neighborhood values from a selfish homeowner. She gestured toward my house as though it were the centerpiece of her case. To someone unaware of the details, her words sounded compelling. She had a gift for speaking with confidence, spinning her story in a way that made me look like the problem. But then came the slip. In the middle of explaining the budget, she said, "I personally approve all spending for this lake," before quickly correcting herself to say the board handled approvals collectively. The cover-up was smooth, but I had caught the truth. I replayed the clip on my phone. There it was, plain as day, Paula revealing just how much control she actually wielded. Her so-called community leadership was more dictatorship than democracy. While she continued her show, I recorded a short video of my own, standing on my dock, with the water and property markers behind me. I spoke simply. "I don't understand why paying taxes on inherited land has become controversial. I'm open to real conversations about property boundaries, but public theatrics in front of my home aren't the answer." The contrast was deliberate. Her spectacle versus my facts. To my surprise, The response was immediate. Comments rolled in online. Why would someone pay taxes on land they don't own? And has anyone actually seen the HOA documents Paula keeps referencing? For the first time, people weren't just nodding along and they were questioning her narrative. The next day, a text from Sophie's number popped up. Check your email. When I opened it, my stomach sank. Attached were photos of Paula's personal calendar. The entries painted a troubling picture. Inspections and emergency meetings that neighbors swore had never occurred. Maintenance logged on days when I'd seen no one near the lake. Expenses approved without any visible improvements to show for them. Whether it was incompetence or deliberate misrepresentation, it was damning. The calendar suggested Paula wasn't just exaggerating as she was fabricating. By midweek, Paula fired back with a door-to-door campaign. I watched as she marched from house to house, delivering polished pitches that lasted 15 minutes or more. Her presentation was structured and rehearsed, almost political. But not every neighbor was receptive more than once. I saw people shut their doors before she'd finished. Then came Thursday's announcement. She was bringing in a lawyer for a so-called boundary map examination at the upcoming Water Festival, an annual neighborhood event I hadn't even known existed. Paula clearly saw it as her stage for a final showdown. She circulated a formal-looking notice demanding I bring property records to the event. At first glance, it looked intimidating, but it also felt off. If she truly had the law on her side, why hadn't she taken the case straight to court? Was this genuine legal firepower or just a bluff dressed up as authority? Either way, I welcomed the chance to put everything on the table. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn air and the sounds of laughter and music. To most neighbors, it was a day of celebration. To me, it was about to be a trial. Sophie met me at the pavilion, gripping her evidence folder like it was a lifeline. "Ready for this?" she asked, her voice tense. I gave a half-smile, though my chest was tight. The truth was, no one could ever be ready for a public property rights battle staged at what was supposed to be a family-friendly festival. The irony wasn't lost on me. Paula escalated by introducing what looked like official legal paperwork, accusing me of spreading falsehoods about HOA finances and management. At first glance, the letter carried the weight of authority, an elegant letterhead, dense legal phrasing, and the tone of something binding. But after carefully reading, I realized it wasn't a court order at all. It lacked the hallmarks of legitimacy: no case number, no court seal, no filing stamps. It was nothing more than intimidation dressed up in legal jargon. Paula had simply upgraded her stage props. The so-called gag order was the clearest sign yet of how far she was willing to go to protect her control. I declined to sign, telling her politely but firmly that I'd rather resolve things through the public boundary review she herself had proposed. Her reaction was immediate, her professional mask slipping in real time. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she snapped, her voice sharp with irritation. "Just pay the fees and stop causing problems." For the first time, her polished community leader persona cracked, revealing the raw frustration beneath. That night, I poured my energy into preparation. If Paula wanted a performance, I'd deliver one backed by facts and technology. I set up a portable projector that could display county maps large enough for a crowd to see, positioned bright markers on the lake, and practiced with a drone to capture time-lapse footage of property lines from above. It seemed almost absurd to be bringing drones and projection gear to a neighborhood dispute town, but Paula had turned this into theater, and I wasn't about to walk on stage unprepared. Every detail mattered. I rehearsed the projector setup under different lighting conditions, making sure the maps would be legible even outdoors. I flew the drone repeatedly, refining the footage to ensure it was crystal clear yet respectful of airspace and privacy rules. Any technical failure would hand her an easy win. I treated the preparation like training for a mission where failure wasn't an option. By Friday, we had agreed on the format: a public boundary review, overseen by Paula's lawyer and open for neighbors to witness. The idea both terrified and relieved me. At last, the dispute would move beyond rumors and manipulation into a space where hard evidence mattered. If I was wrong about my land rights, this would expose me. But if Paula was wrong about her authority, the entire neighborhood would see it. Saturday dawned gray and heavy. the kind of weather that felt like it carried weight. The community center hummed with unusual energy as residents streamed in, drawn by curiosity and the promise of resolution. Paula had transformed our dispute into the neighborhood's main event, complete with rows of folding chairs, a makeshift podium, and her lawyer looking every bit the part in his dark suit. The atmosphere was less community gathering, more courtroom trial, except here, every neighbor was judge and jury. Paula radiated confidence as she organized her props, enlarged documents, a presentation board, even a pointer to punctuate her speech. She smiled and nodded to familiar faces, playing the role of a reluctant leader forced to rein in a difficult neighbor. Her certainty was so persuasive it made me question my own preparation. I quietly set up my projector and laptop in the back corner, running one last systems check. Sophie slipped in and took a seat in the middle of the crowd, far enough to appear neutral, but close enough to act when the moment came. The lawyer opened the session with a polished explanation of HOA powers, property regulations, and county laws. His words were calm, professional, and thorough. Neighbors nodded along, reassured by his authority. For a while, it looked as if Paula's version of events was about to be stamped with legitimacy. Then it was my turn. I dimmed the lights and powered on the projector, overlaying official county maps directly onto the lake's surface visible through the windows. The lines lit up in precise alignment with the buoys I had placed, clearly showing where my property extended. The room fell silent as the evidence spoke louder than any argument. Next came the drone footage, sweeping time-lapse shots of the lake, boundaries outlined from above with unarguable clarity. The images revealed exactly how much of the water fell within my ownership, far beyond what Paula had claimed as community property. Murmurs spread through the crowd as the truth sank in. Then Sophie rose from her seat, and the momentum shifted again. "I need to address the financial side," she said firmly. All eyes turned to her as she held up documents. "For 2 years, I've tracked HOA fee collections. Paula's numbers don't match." Her words landed like a thunderclap. Sophie's reputation for detail and fairness gave her claims instant weight in a way I could never match. She laid out the records: more than $25,000 collected from families under the pretense of lake maintenance, yet no contractors hired, no equipment purchased, no visible improvements. The money had simply vanished. The crowd erupted. Neighbors shouted questions. "Where's our money? What did you do with 25 grand? Paula tried to wave it off, claiming Sophie's math was flawed, but her protests rang hollow. The anger in the room was sharp and rising. Most telling of all was her lawyer's silence. As Sophie laid out the numbers and my evidence played on the screen, his earlier confidence faded. She knew, as everyone now did, that Paula's case was crumbling. The lawyer's departure made it clear. Paula's position was legally indefensible. When pressed about collecting fees from non-home members for property they actually owned, he simply packed up and walked out, offering no legal backing for her claims. His exit was an unspoken admission that Paula's authority rested on misrepresentation and possibly criminal behavior. Left without her legal shield, Paula was exposed and vulnerable. Her attempts at damage control backfired as she grew defensive, snapping at neighbors who asked for details about missing funds. "You don't understand how complicated community management is," she exclaimed to one resident requesting expense reports. "I've been protecting your property values while dealing with freeloaders." Her words revealed the contempt she had harbored for the community she'd manipulated. The mask of leadership had fully slipped, exposing her true character. Now, in front of witnesses, Paula was signing documents that formalized her defeat. Within hours of the meeting, she received legal orders requiring the return of all misappropriated funds within 30 days, reimbursement of investigative legal fees, and formal relinquishment of any claims to authority over community resources or property management. The signing took place publicly at the community center, under supervision, leaving no room for future dispute. Her signature was hesitant, but county attorneys had made the consequences of refusal unmistakably clear. Watching the process unfold felt like witnessing justice in real time. The repercussions were comprehensive. In addition to financial restitution, Paula was banned from serving on any HOA or community management board in the county for 5 years, preventing her from transplanting her manipulative tactics elsewhere. She also faced a tax investigation into unreported income from her fee collections, exposing her to potential criminal charges beyond the local dispute. Every dollar she had collected would now be scrutinized, ensuring her misconduct would have long-lasting consequences. The physical consequences were equally satisfying. Paula had to remove all unauthorized fences, signage, and barriers she had erected around the lake during her campaign of control. The work took an entire weekend, performed under community supervision, using her own tools and transport, reinforcing that her actions had consequences. Each removed sign and dismantled barrier symbolized a small victory for legitimate property rights over manufactured authority, witnessed by neighbors who had once been intimidated. Perhaps most humiliating was the requirement for Paula to record a formal apology video acknowledging her deception and financial misconduct, shared through the same neighborhood channels she had used to spread falsehoods. The video forced her to publicly admit her lies about property boundaries, fabricated HOA authority, and misappropriated funds. Though clearly guided by legal counsel, her discomfort was real. The woman who had mastered public manipulation was now compelled to confess her wrongdoing and apologize to the community she had deceived. The resolution that emerged from this crisis proved far more effective than anything Paula's authoritarian style could have achieved. Residents collaboratively established a voluntary community fund managed by rotating representatives, ensuring no single individual could ever wield unchecked power again. The system operated with full transparency, monthly meetings, detailed financial reports, and required approvals for all expenditures. Protections against mandatory fees and exclusionary practices were formalized, with agreements filed with the county clerk and incorporated into property deeds, safeguarding future residents. The transformation was immediately visible. HOA signs that had once restricted lake access were replaced with inclusive markers declaring the lake open to all residents. Families now enjoy the water without fear of confrontation or arbitrary fees. Children splashed freely, parents relaxed, and the contrast between cooperative community management and Paula's former heavy-handed control was striking. The community celebrated with a collaborative lake festival, featuring boat races, swimming competitions, picnics, and volunteer musical performances. Everything was done voluntarily, without mandatory fees or forced participation, reflecting the community spirit Paula had tried to suppress. The financial recovery was substantial, providing tangible proof that collective effort and transparency could restore both resources and trust. The benefits extended far beyond simple restitution as they translated into real, lasting community improvement. The $25,000 Paula had collected through her fabricated fee system was returned to the contributing families, but many residents chose to redirect their refunds into the new voluntary community fund. This created a substantial budget for legitimate lake maintenance and improvement projects. The money that had once been stolen through deception was now fueling projects managed transparently and collaboratively. Remarkably, the voluntary contributions exceeded the mandatory fees Paula had once imposed, showing that people were eager to support community initiatives when they had oversight and a voice in decision-making. New dock safety equipment, environmental protections, and maintenance improvements were funded by genuine community engagement rather than coerced payments. Standing by the lake on a quiet evening weeks later, I watched neighborhood children play safely in waters that were finally free of artificial restrictions and manufactured conflict. The contrast was astonishing. The community that had once regarded me as a selfish troublemaker now respected my persistence in challenging an authority that had seemed legitimate but was rooted in deception and financial fraud. The isolation and stress of battling Paula's campaigns had given way to authentic relationships built on mutual trust and respect. Neighbors who had once avoided me now stopped to talk about lake conditions, ongoing projects, and maintaining the collaborative spirit we had fought to establish. The transformation from conflict to cooperation felt complete and enduring. The legal documentation that had launched this entire struggle in my grandfather's property records was now properly recognized and respected by everyone in the neighborhood. What Paula had sought to obscure with intimidation and manufactured complexity was, in fact, straightforward. Once people were willing to examine the evidence rather than accept her claims, the truth became undeniable. Those public county records, which anyone could have accessed, had been ignored for so long because of her manipulation. Now, they served as the foundation for real community cooperation instead of fraudulent fee collection. At first, I had no idea I owned such a large portion of the lake. Now, the entire neighborhood enjoyed it together, and no fees, no fabricated rules, just water, sun, and people finally trusting each other again. It still amazes me how close we came to losing it all: our access, our money, even our sense of community, just because one ambitious person wrapped her self-interest in official-looking rules and paperwork. She nearly succeeded, which is the scary part. It only takes one confident voice and neighbors too polite, tired, or uncurious to question it. But this time, the lake pushed back. Maybe that's the real lesson. No matter how smooth a lie seems or how official it looks, truth doesn't need a megaphone, it only needs someone stubborn enough to keep asking questions. If you've ever stood your ground against someone abusing fake authority, share your story in the comments. And if this journey made you cheer even once, hit the thanks button to help keep stories like this alive. Stay skeptical, stay kind, and if anyone ever tells you what you can or cannot do on your own dock, check the data and bring receipts. Thanks for watching Ya Stories. If you enjoyed this one, hit like and subscribe for more wild tales coming your way.